We really were caught off guard by the decision to execute Buntion. After nearly 32 years, we just figured he was just going to die of old age. But we're moving towards it, and we'll move through it as a family, just like we've always done.
Why is it important for you to be there for the execution?
First of all, I truly believe that this will give my family closure. The end of that chapter of our lives. I don't yet know for sure if I'm actually going to be able to stand there and view him dying or if I'm just going to be in the family room, but I have to represent Jim. I've been Mrs. Irby for the greatest part of my life. And I want our grandsons to know that we represented their grandfather and that we saw this last chapter to the very end.
Tell us about Jim.
It's such a cliche, but the love of my life. We were just crazy about each other. Obviously, we had 2 children in 5 years. If we weren't working, we were together. We were rodeoing or taking the kids to the zoo. He was my hero. He helped me through some rough times, and we built a great life, and we had lots of plans. He was nearly 20 years with HPD and was planning to retire and open a feed store and pretty much be a stay-at-home dad.
When was the last time you saw Jim?
That morning, he'd come in late the night before off of a dignitary escort. President Bush was in and out of town at that point in time. And the kids wanted to kiss him goodbye, and I didn't want him to wake him up. So they just gave Daddy, actually, butterfly kisses. And I didn't really get a chance to kiss him. I was trying to hustle them out and not wake him. So that was the last time. And then after that, I didn't see him until we were in the emergency room that night. My mom and dad and my youngest sister were already there, and I had dinner with one of the nurses, fixed us dinner at home, and Suzanne Simpson, who lived nearby, was another solo officer's wife, came knocking at the door and asked me if something was wrong with my phone. And I said no, and she said, well, Jim's been hurt. He's at Ben Taub. Nobody wanted me to see him, but it wasn't really going to be real unless I did. And so they had him in a room, and his head was wrapped and his chest was all wrapped in bandages. And I pulled those aside, and I could see the hole in the sore head and the way he'd blown out his chest.
How old were Cody and Callie at the time?
Cody turned 3 a month to the day after his father was killed, and Callie was 4 days past her first birthday.
When you got to the first trial, what was that like to go through that?
Oh, agonizing, terrifying. I wasn't really in favor of the death penalty at that point in time. I've spent most of my adult life working to try and save lives and keep people alive, but the only alternative, because there was no life without parole at that point in time, was that he would be eligible for parole in about 10 years. And that was just unacceptable. they had already, those two men in the car, had already been paroled. They were out on parole for about 6 weeks and had failed to report to a halfway house within 24 hours. But the blue warrant, the paper that stated that they were in violation of their parole, wasn't signed until the day after Jim was killed on June the 28th. So I started the foundation and tried to work to change a lot of those things. And I had to try and get myself comfortable with the idea of the death penalty, but it's been so long now, it was really stunning to get the call from the DA's office right after Thanksgiving that after all this time they were going to go ahead and execute him. The kids and I had just, whole family had come to believe he was just going to die on death row.
The second trial, not second trial, but the second resentencing.
Yes.
You no longer were a baby, you were an adult. What was that like to stand beside your mom and go through that resentencing phase?
Because I was so young when he died, it wasn't really real for me, I guess. It was real in the fact that I didn't have my father. I didn't have a father to, spend Father's Days with, or go to father-daughter dances with, or, I'd always thought about the fact of who's going to walk me down the aisle, when I end up getting married. But then when we went through the trial, it made it all so much more real, so much more, painful, because I, saw all the evidence, and I testified with Bunchen there.
When the jury returned another death sentence, were you relieved?
I was. We were quite relieved, but again, saddened. It's still a conflict, as I said. I don't know if I can actually watch him executed, but I'm still going to be there and support my children, and my sisters, my family are going with me.
I think we're both really just ready to close the chapter on this part of our lives. We're both just ready to finally not have it hanging over our family's head. We want to be able to finally move on. And like I said earlier, it's not about revenge. It's not about anything like that. It's just finally being able to move on from this thing that has affected my whole life, and most of my mothers and my brothers. We need closure and
A release. And I truly believe it'll help Jim rest in peace.